Hey everybody! So in today's lesson we're going to prepare a color chart of our portrait mixes based on the paints that you have. And if you haven't checked out the previous lesson on how to choose your paints for portrait painting, you need to go back to that lesson, go through that, and then come and do this one. Now this is interactive, so you need to watch the video first, then you can watch it again and then follow along with me so you understand the process of what I'm doing. What we're doing is we're creating our color chart for our mixes because typically when we do our portrait painting, especially if it's from a live model, you want to have your colors pre-mixed ahead of time because in the real world you're paying a model by the hour and you want to get that over with fast, right? But in a practical world we work from a photograph, so it's not so critical that we have our paints already pre-mixed, but once you get into the routine of having your stuff pre-mixed ahead of time, and it's not a lot and it's not hard, you'll be able to get your paintings done much faster. The challenge with acrylics is because they dry really fast. So what you can do is you can add some extender or some medium to slow down the drying time. You can also mist it with a little bit of water. On the palette, I have my DIY Stay Wet palette here, which is folded paper towels with the paints on top, and I have a video on how to do that, so I won't go over that. So I've got my palette here with my mixes. I'll go over them in a second. Paper towels over here. I got some round brushes because they're super easy to clean. I also have two cleaning buckets, water, where especially with making up the mixes, you want to make sure your brush is clean each time. Rinse the brush in one bucket, blot it dry, then rinse it in the other bucket. When the first bucket gets so dirty, just dump that out, and then you just flip them so that becomes your secondary bucket. So let me just explain that because that's confusing. So I'll clean my paints in this one first, then I'll blot it and then clean it in this one. When this one gets so dirty, I'll put fresh water in it, then I'll move this bucket over here, and then I'll clean my brushes in this one first, and then this one with clean water. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. I've got my art journal here. You can use a pen or a pigment liner to make some notes. Then I also have another sheet of palette paper. Normally I would use this. This is a full size 12 by 16 palette. I would use this. It's glass, so it shines, so I'm not able to put that on camera. So I'm just going to use another pad of palette paper to create some extra mixes as we tweak them. And this chart that you're making here, you're going to probably have to do it 2 or 3 times until you get the mixes right. Then when you get your mixes done and you're comfortable with them, if you can, if at all possible, put it on a massive sheet of 22 by 30 paper. Draw the grids out and all that stuff. Joe and I are developing an actual color mixing journal, and that won't be ready for a few weeks. If you're interested, just fire me off an email from the website and let me know, and I'll let you know when it's ready. But it's just to help, so you're not having to spend all this time creating the grids and all that stuff. But it's really simple. You just measure out. The larger the squares, the better, if possible. The other thing is that if you don't have large paper, you can take cards and paint them, cut them and paint them, and then glue them onto a canvas. But the larger the square, the better, because you can see. Based on the last video, I had to do some prep work for this just to make sure that I got the mixes right. Because we're using the DecoArt Americana Premium Acrylic paints for this lesson, because that line doesn't have alizarin crimson or a naphthol red light. Well, I had to make those ahead of time. But what I did is I took the DecoArt Traditions, put it here, the permanent alizarin crimson and the naphthol red light here, then just thinned it out a little bit so I can see the true underlying color. And then creating my mixes, which is primarily Cad Red Hue with about half a part of Cad Yellow Medium. Then for my alizarin crimson mixture, it's about 2 parts of Red Violet to 1 part Cad Red Hue. So it's these ones here that I'm using. Okay, and then what I did is I took on other cards, I would just put the swatches down, just compared it to make sure I was close. In the real world, if I had to use these paints to create a portrait, I would go to get my Traditions and I would bring out my naphthol red light and permanent alizarin crimson, so I didn't have to do this. Or take my Traditions, the naphthol red light, that's a given, but the alizarin crimson, you can take quinacridone magenta, quinacridone burnt orange and a little bit of phthalo green on the blue side, a touch of that, and that you can make your own. But with the premium acrylics, there is no quinacridone burnt orange, there is no quinacridone magenta that I know of, and I don't have the phthalo green blue. But this particular palette was done here was basically, if you don't even have some of the core colors, that you can work around it. Alrighty, so the paints, now this is done large. Like I never teach creating a palette for portraits on something this small. It's just not possible. It's so large, but I'm going to do it over a couple of pages just to make it a little bit easier. The first mix that we're going to start with is we're going to basically create our mixtures on here and then get the color right, and then we're going to transfer it onto here. And so don't create your mixtures right on your chart. Create them on the side, you know, test them on swatches, then take that and put it here. Okay? So the first one is I typically would always use with the with my oils and that I would use the first mixture using a lot of yellow oxide, or yellow ochre in the oils, but yellow oxide in the acrylics. But I also want to show you a raw sienna mixture. So I'm going to make two. You don't have to use these. You can, you know, use them up as you go. So always starting with white. And then to that, the first mixture we're going to do is white with a little bit of yellow oxide, a little bit more than that. We get a pale color. I'm going to make it a little bit darker than I normally would because we're going to be creating a value scale. And then to that mixture, a speck of the red-orange mixture. A little bit more than that. Creates a very warm flesh tone. And you can see if you need something even warmer, you just add a little bit more red. So I like that. So I'm going to take that and I put that here. And I probably could have even made that even a little bit redder. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just load white on my brush and go right underneath. This mixture you need to do on a second palette so you get it right. But then you just take your dirty brush, just keep picking up white, and you get your value scale. And I can even go one more. Usually when I'm teaching this on a large scale, especially in a people to people in an in-person class, this is done on a 22 by 60 board, and there's 6 values. Okay, so there we go. So now what we want to do is we want to clean our brush, and it sounds pretty basic, but your brush has to be clean every single time. So I'm going to clean that, rinse it in the first bucket, blot it again, okay, and then clean it again in the second bucket. Now we're going to create a different version. So I'm going to take titanium white, then I'm going to take raw sienna, and get something relatively dark. Yeah, let's see, a little bit darker than that. A little bit darker than that. And I'm looking for, you know, something that's a little bit around the mid-range for the value. I like that. Now I'm going to warm it up a little bit with some of my red-orange. That's pretty good. But see the different mixture you get? So typically I would always use yellow oxide, or no, yellow ochre, yellow oxide for my mixes. If I say yellow ochre by accident, yellow ochre, yellow oxide are the same. One's synthetic and one's organic. So, you know, this is much warmer than this, but I have seen flesh tones like this. So we're going to put that one there. But because we already have the pigments set up in our palette, it's so easy to choose. And then I'm going to take the dirty brush from the outside, pick up some white. I picked up a little bit too much white there. Just going to pick up a little bit more of that paint. up a little bit more white. And a little bit more white. Always from the outside so you're not contaminating what's in the middle. So you're always loading from the outside. Then after, when you get all the outside was all muck like this, you can take a blade and you can just scrape it. All right. So now I'm going to wipe my brush, rinse it in the first bucket, blot it, then rinse it in the second bucket. And when you do your rinsing and cleaning of brushes, don't do it over your palette or your chart because you might drop some paint. So what happens if you have the yellow oxide and it's not quite right? You don't have any raw sienna. We can make something up similar. This I didn't cover off in the previous lesson. So I'm going to take some titanium white. So I'm looking about getting something a little bit closer to this, but that's a bit too orange. Then I'm going to take some yellow oxide. So we're basically making that same mix again. And then I'm going to touch it to a tad of burnt sienna. A little bit more. A little bit more. There we go. And then I'm going to warm it up a bit with a little bit of the red. So it just gives you something a little bit different. It's not dark enough, so let me just make it a little bit darker. So a bit more yellow oxide, burnt sienna, a bit of the red. You have to make it dark enough because to lighten it, it's easy to add white. But if you have to make up more of the dark, then that's a lot more work. Ideally what we want to do is we want to make it as oh, my supervisor's leaving. Chaos was here. You want to make it as easy as possible to create your mixes. The least amount of paint to create the most amount of mixes in the least amount of time. We're not taking shortcuts, but you want to spend time actual painting and not having to spend all your time color mixing, which is why I like doing it ahead of time. Now with acrylics, you're going to maybe add some extender, or if you're using something like say a golden open, which works like oils, then you don't have to worry. Okay, where are we next? So you know what? I better write this stuff down. So this is titanium white, yellow oxide, and a red violet. This is titanium white, raw sienna, and then the red violet. No, red orange. Silly girl, red orange. And then this is titanium white, and then yellow oxide, burnt sienna, and then red orange. And I will go here and say red orange equals red orange, aka naphthol red light or Cad red light. I lost there for a second. Alrighty, so that takes care of that one. So now the next mixture we can make is basically, we've already done it right here, is just a basic flesh tone. So we're going to take white, and what I just did what I said not to do, well it's a bit late now, with a little bit of yellow oxide. Make it a little bit darker than that, because that way we can actually get some good values. This actual mix at the top, you can make it dark, because then you can lighten it with this value scale. So don't make this part too light. Now we're going to take white. On the dirty brush, just keep loading white. And more white. That mixture was a little light. Okay, and lock the brush. Bucket number 1 and bucket number 2. And write down that this one is titanium white and then yellow oxide. Okay. So now the next mix that we have to make, we already made it here, but I'm going to make it much, much darker. I'm going to do it on the palette first. Titanium white, yellow oxide, much, much darker, and burnt sienna. Darker than that. Which is very close to this one here, but it's just much darker. And then pick up white. Pick up white. And if you can do this part on the palette paper, it's much better. That way you're not going to get streaks of paint. I will tell you, there is nothing like creating color charts and color mixing like in oils though. And I'm working on unprimed paper, so do yourself a favor, prime your paper with gesso first, or use canvas paper. Make a note. So let me just go here. Okay, so this is titanium white, yellow ochre plus, and burnt sienna plus. So this is just means more of the paint. And now we're going to do the same thing again, this time using the raw sienna, which can make it much darker. And as these dry, they are going to get darker. This is still not quite dark enough because you want to be able to get at least 6 values in here. So I'm going to take a little bit of white, but you got to use enough paint so you can have enough in your brush so you can create these value scales. And then raw sienna, we're going to make this one nice and dark. A bit more raw sienna. And then the burnt sienna. Nice. Nice. How dark is that? Not even close. Whoops. Whoops, whoops, whoops. I went into yellow oxide by mistake. And also, if you have the ability to pick up some gray palette paper, use that. It is so much better than using white when you're painting, because every mix we're making is going to be, it's going to look dark because we're working on white. When you're painting a portrait, we're going to be toning to canvas. You're not going to be working on white. It's always nice if you can get something toned. I'm using white because my paper is white to create these swatches. Go. But you see the idea I'm going with. So whether you use yellow oxide or raw sienna to create your flesh tones is going to be completely up to you. But you know why it's so easy? Because you already have it in your palette. So it's not like you have to run out and get the paint. It's already part of your palette. If you don't have raw sienna, don't worry about it. Just stick with yellow oxide. Because you already know now if you need to make it a speck darker or a speck more red, then you can add a burnt sienna to it. Now this one here is titanium white, and then it's raw sienna plus plus and burnt sienna plus plus. I'm gonna go like that. Okay. Alrighty. So now the next one, and I'm gonna write these down first because I ran out of room up there. Next one is going to be titanium white and burnt sienna. I want to make these dark enough to get good values. Now if you're doing this in oils, your oils are not going to dry darker. Acrylics, they dry darker. That's really nice. Oh, and you know what else I should have? These are all warm. These are all warm. warm skin tones. Okay. Including the one I'm making here, but not enough room. So, where was I? Yeah, white and burnt sienna. Then we just lighten it with white. And then one of the reasons why just basically doing this is that you'll be able to see when you look at your photograph or your model, you'll be able to get an idea of where the values are. On top of that, these colors that I'm making here, you don't have to use them as is. You can always add a little bit of something extra to tone it. To make it, to shift it a little bit, you know, the different way in the color wheel. So if you're going to have, let's say you have, or if I'm beside, let's say a really, really red wall, there's going to be reflection of the red wall onto my face. I can turn around and pick whatever skin tone that is the closest match to me, then adjust it by adding a little bit more of my red-orange mixture. Or let's see, what color am I? I'm more of a yellowish right now. So I'm thinking I would probably be closer to, looking at the monitor, I'm thinking either this one here. Yeah, I'm thinking probably this one here, right between these two. So I would add a little bit more red to it, the red-orange, just to warm it up just a little bit more. And this one is also warm. Okay, and now we're getting into some cool mixtures. So you can see why now if you can do this large, it's so much better. So if you haven't watched the last video, you need to go and do that right now, because what I'm going to say now won't make sense unless you watch that video. When I did that video, I got stuck on raw umber because I had never used it before, because I just got it in, and to me it looks more like burnt umber. I'm positive it's more like burnt umber. So sent out an email to DecoArt. At this time that you're watching this, I've likely heard from them already. So I'm going to be using the raw umber, pretending it's just raw umber. I'm not going to, you know, go over anything about it possibly being, you know, a different. Mind you, I did compare it with the this is the DecoArt Americana, the premium acrylics. I compared it to the actual Americana high-end craft paint, and it's very similar. So it's likely it's just the pigment, the way they processed it for this line. All right, so raw umber and titanium white. See, the actual raw umber that I use with Tradition, that's why it shocked me. The oils, the Traditions, and the fluid acrylics, this is a lot more gray. And what I'm mixing right now is warm. This is not cool. This is warm. This is not cool at all. I definitely see some red in there. You may not on camera, because monitors are all calibrated differently. But I definitely see some red in there. And it's not my lighting, because my lights here are a cool white. If anything, it should make the mixture more cool. But I'm still going to make the chart up. And I'll be doing a video similar to this using the Traditions and the fluid acrylic, so you'll be able to see the differences with that as well. We can cool it off though. We can cool it off. Yeah, I'm gonna show you. We can cool it off. Because what's to say that the raw umber that you have, you know, if you have the Americana or if you have the premium acrylics, what if it's the same way? So we have titanium white and raw umber. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to, and this is supposed to be cool. I'll break the charts and I'll write this cool. Then we're going to take titanium white, raw umber, and a bit of carbon black. And although, and you know, Joe was mentioning, you know, skip through a lot of that stuff because the video is long. I don't want to skip through anything because I don't want you missing out on anything. Because the color mixing, this is so important that you know how to fix all these little things. And a speck carbon black. I'm just going to wipe off most. Bring it in here. And you know what? Now this is looking more like raw umber. Just cooled it off quite a bit. Darkened it and cooled it off. But we're going to add our value scale. Make our value scale, I should say. Now I have a terrible glare. You don't see the glare that I'm seeing. Again, what I'm doing here, adding the white, do that on here. So you're going to take that, and you're going to go like this. You're going to take your paint, add your white, and then you'll come in here. Then you'll pick up more white, go back, you know, in the same mixture, and then make your swatch, which is probably what I should be doing anyway. So I'm going to do that from now on. There we go. This one here is a little dark, a little light. Let me just darken that up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, this is much closer. I like that one better. All right, so this is the one. I like that better. Okie doke. So now the next one, another cool tone that you can make. Blot the brush, rinse in bucket 1, blot the brush, rinse in bucket 2. So now we're going to take, to make up our next mixture, and we're going to take, and again, you can make this twice. I'm going to do it with yellow oxide and raw sienna. So we're going to take, just seeing to see how fluid this paint is. May have to add a little bit of water in a bit. So I'm going to make some white. Make some white, put some white on. And then now I'm going to take a little bit of raw sienna. Oh, I should have did the yellow oxide first. Okay, that's fine. So white, raw sienna, a little bit more than that. Make it nice and dark. And now a tiny bit of black. Oh, this should be much darker than this. Much darker than that. Much, much darker. Can I steal from there? There we go. So although the yellow is, the raw sienna is warm, we're cooling it down with black. So I'm going to put that over here. It's still not dark enough. It needs to be much darker than that. And this is where you get misled, is when you're working on white, everything looks darker. But it also helps when you're creating your mixes that it makes everything look lighter as well. There we go. All right, and then I'm going to take white. Put that on there. Pick up more white. Right there. And pick up more white right in there. And please don't try to cheat yourself by just using the palette paper as your color chart. The color chart you're going to get, you want it to be something where it's going to last you years, something substantial if at all possible. So this one here is titanium white, and then we did raw sienna, and then carbon black. So this one's going to be titanium white, yellow oxide, and carbon black. Got the brush. Bucket 1 and bucket 2. And I'm going to keep saying that just as a mantra, just to, you know, so you get used to it. All right, titanium white. Good honking amount of yellow oxide because we want to make it dark. And carbon black. thinking a little bit more black. Now what happens when you take yellow oxide and black? This turns green. It turns green. Beauty, perfect. When I was studying the method of Daniel Green, he was saying that a lot of the old masters, depending on the style that they were working with, they just had black, was it black, yellow, and red in their palette, because the black acted as their blue. And it all depends on what black they were using. And then more white. A bit more than that. There we go. Beauty. That's still not quite white enough. When you're working with when you're working with 6 values, the 6th value typically would be, it's like white almost with a tint of this, would be your lightest light. All right. So these are cool. And I'm going to, wonder if I can get away with just doing, no, I don't think I'm going to have enough paper. Shoot. So it would have been nice to have that all on one sheet. Okay, well, let's see what we can do. Now we're going to mix a reddish dark and a greenish dark. And this is where now it's going to depend on the red. We're not going to be using white for this one. What we're going to be doing is taking our alizarin crimson mixture with a little bit of phthalo green blue if you have it. I'm going to use Viridian because I don't have phthalo green blue in here. So we're first going to take our alizarin crimson mixture. So I'm going to call it red violet. And with more alizarin crimson, a little bit of Viridian, and then we're going to lighten it, our value scale, with Cad Yellow Medium. Then we're going to create another one which is going to be Viridian, more Viridian, with a little bit of the red violet, and we're going to lighten it with Cad Yellow Medium as well. So we're going to start off, let's take our mixture here. So this is our makeshift red violet, and we're going to take a speck of the Viridian, which will neutralize it. And this mixture works well because red violet is a red that leans towards blue, and Viridian is a green that leans towards blue. Now we're going to take Cad Yellow Medium right in there. And you know what I should have done first? Let me do this again. I missed a step. I forgot to put the original mixture on the palette or on the chart. It's okay because I can use this. I can use this for the next mixture. But you want to make sure this is more red, not more green. All right, so that's going to be this one here. Okay. Then adding a little bit of, how am I going to do this? Yeah, I'll just do it here. So a little bit of Cad Yellow Medium, and what you get is a rusty color. And you keep adding the Cad Yellow Medium. So no white, Cad Yellow Medium. So this is useful for reddish skin tones. And with this as well, you want to try to get 6 different, this isn't really values, we are lightening, but we're also creating another color. And I'm going to only stop here because I have another set of mixtures to make. So now we're going to take our red violet mixture. Now we're adding more green to it. And this one I'm going to have to play with for a second. We're not going to add white. And I'm thinking that's probably still not quite green enough. So let's take some Cad Yellow Medium to try that first. Yeah, it's fine. Probably, you know what? Probably could be a little bit more green. That's what it is. There we go. A little bit more green. And when I look at this color, I immediately think of olive. I immediately think of olive. And a bit more yellow. And you just keep lightening it with yellow in the dirty brush. Let me really lighten that one up a bit more so it really stands out. There we go. Okay, we only have 4 more colors to make for, well, sort of, sort of. You have to figure out how this is going to set up on your palette. All right, so now this is the red violet. I'm going to go plus plus Viridian, and then with Cad Yellow Medium. And this is Viridian plus plus red violet, and then Cad Yellow Medium. So every time I go plus plus, that just means it's more of that color. And then red violet, I'm going to go here. Red violet is AKA alizarin crimson, because that's the color I would typically use. So now what we're going to do is the next mixture. Let's see. We're going to take raw umber and yellow oxide. And we're going to take more of the raw umber. Nice. This is not really big enough. So let me just write this down right now so I don't mess this up. So raw umber, more yellow oxide. And it's not enough room. Then we're going to take more yellow oxide. Not enough room. Okay, and then we're going to blot the brush from burnt sienna, and I would say roughly equal parts, but you can play with this mix as well and add more yellow oxide. Then you're going to lighten it with a little bit of yellow oxide. Raw umber. And burnt sienna. The burnt sienna is what warms it up, because we're adding red to it. And then a little bit of yellow oxide. And you know, and what you can do is take the raw umber, yellow oxide, and then take that mixture and add more yellow oxide to create that. Then you take your raw umber plus burnt sienna, put that there, then add yellow oxide to here. That way you have the actual original dark mixture. This is really dark. Then take a bit more yellow oxide just to lighten it a little bit. But you can create this one with a few value scales. I just didn't have enough. I didn't have the paper big enough to fit on the table. So this one here is cool. And this is burnt sienna. This is cool. This is warm, and this is warm. Now, can you see all these different types of skin tones? One thing I would say is this should be much darker, and then you'll be able to get your 6 scales. I wouldn't be able to go very much with the 6 scales because this is already really light. But if I did the 6 scales, this would probably be maybe one value lighter to make the lightest light. But you can see all these different things. So these are your warm skin tones here and here. Then you've got some cool skin tones. Then you've got your reddish and your greenish, and then you've got also some darks here. So all these colors, then you can tweak them even further by making them either a little bit more red or a little bit more yellow. But you'll notice that on the palette, I don't have my blues on there. So all I have is my Viridian, my red-violet mixture, my red-orange mixture, hence yellow medium, yellow oxide, raw sienna, burnt sienna, raw umber, black, carbon black, and then white. That's it. That's it. So although in the previous video, all the colors that I shown, all those extras, you don't need to use them. They're great for doing, you know, the shirts and background and stuff like that. You can even do a background using these as well. The only thing is that we don't have a blue in here, but you know, you could use, if you didn't want to use blue, use a black. But avoid using too much black because it just gets really muddy. Alrighty, so I do want to apologize getting stuck on this one here. I did it in the wrong order, and that totally threw me for a loop. But I hope that it gives you a good understanding on creating some different types of skin tones. But again, with this mixture, because you're having to make the red orange and the red violet, and I'm using Viridian instead of phthalo green blue, that it is going to look different if compared to using the actual Naphtha red light, alizarin crimson, and phthalo green blue. Because I'm not using the traditional paint that I would for my portraits, this chart would look different than, let's say, when I do my traditions chart or my fluid acrylics chart. But even saying that, you may not have some of those colors, so feel free to kind of substitute. As long as you have an idea of what you're looking for to create your portrait colors, doing, you know, these ones here, you may prefer. And depending on the photograph you're painting, if the photograph you're painting, if the skin tone is more peachy, you don't have to do this one or this one. You can just stick with this one here, and maybe, you know, these ones here, you may not have to go with the yellow oxide flesh tone. You can just get away with using the raw sienna. And then this one here. So you don't have to make all of these up, but when you get your photograph, you'll look, okay, what color do I, and this is, now the next lesson after this is where we're going to map the colors. That's where you're going to take your photograph and you're going to go, this, what do I see? I see this, but it's a little bit redder, so then we'll map that out. That lesson is going to be a little bit longer, so we're just going to focus on part of the face, not the entire face, just so you have an idea on the process. All right, so there we go. We're all finished. It's a long lesson, but as we progress, the lessons do become a little bit longer and longer because it involves a lot more analyzing, making the mixture, trying it, analyzing again, and adjusting. And that is circular. It just keeps going and going until you get the right color. John Singer Sargent, when he was doing his painting, he would spend most of his time mixing the color, because once he got his color right, it was one stroke on the canvas, and that was it. He didn't fiddle and, you know, touch up and blend and touch up on he spent all his time mixing the right color on his palette, not on the canvas. I kind of like mixing sometimes on the canvas because you get some nice nuances in there, but that's going to be up to your style of painting. So what I recommend is you try a bunch of different things to find out what clicks with you, and then whatever clicks with you, really explore that technique, that method, those mixes and all that stuff. I'm just giving you a starting point, and then you can expand from there as we go through the rest of the lessons. All right, so I'm going to leave you with this. So create your chart as big as possible, just to make it easier. That way you're not going to have to fuss. If you draw your grids, 2-inch squares are great. That way you can put it on the wall. I just want to show you. This is the chart that I use when I'm teaching. When I'm teaching. This is one of the charts. Okay, so this is one of the charts that I'm using when I'm teaching, and then on the back. So you can see there's a lot of mixes here. These are all for portraits. Okay, so big. And even that, the squares are a little bit small. I was working with oils, and there was a lot of mixes to be made. And feel free to make them over a few sheets of paper, and then just tape them together on the back. Nothing wrong with that. All right, and don't forget to make notes. So create your palette, and then once you've got it and take a look at it, feel free to create it you know, a few more times, and just date and blah, 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 date it, and that way you can see how it's changed. So every time you get a new paint you want to try for portraits, create another chart and then date it, and make notes, make lots of notes, and keep everything together so you can reference it. All right, now I'm going to go clean up my big mess, paint all over my hands, waiting for supervisor to come back to jump on the table. So take some pictures and jump on over into the private Facebook group, share your pictures there so we can all you know, compare what we've done, compare the paints, compare how we've done our charts. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in there. You know, I hang out in there. Lots of great people, you know, willing to, you know, share advice and tips, and just, you know, it's a really great community to belong to. All right, so I am going to clean up, prepare for the next lesson, and until I see you in that video, stay inspired.